Welcome, everyone. I would like to thank you for joining this digital dialogue on youth empowerment. We are coming to you from the great state of Iowa. It's August and the corn is tall, and we're right in the middle of the Iowa State Fair. In fact, I'm going to be heading to the fairgrounds after this. I have harvest season on my mind, and of course I'm also thinking about the Borlaug Dialogue and the Global Youth Institute in October. Please join us for these events, October 24th through the 26th here in Des Moines. We will be honoring the 2023 World Food Prize laureate, Heidi Kuhn, and welcoming back the Global Youth Institute in person for the first time since 2019. I know that Dr. Borlaug would be so excited about what we have planned for this year's event. What makes the World Food Prize Foundation so special is that direct influence of Dr. Borlaug. His passion for youth and youth empowerment created the thriving programs that we have today. Each year we engage 5,000 young leaders in food security focused projects. Since our programs began, nearly 50,000 students have taken part in these transformative experiences. Recently, I took the staff to see the Borlaug Farm in Howard County. It is an amazing place where you are able to get a sense of what Dr. Borlaug experienced growing up here in Iowa. The one-room country schoolhouse that Norman Borlaug attended as a child is now on the property at the Borlaug Farm. Dr. Borlaug said that the education he received at that schoolhouse gave him the ability to communicate with people around the world. I also want to tell you about Dr. Borlaug's teacher and what she thought of him. His teacher was also his cousin, didn't think he was the best student, but that he had grit and determination. That grit and determination changed the world. At the World Food Prize Foundation, we want to help young people find their voices and their passion to change the world like Dr. Borlaug did. On August 12th, the world celebrated International Youth Day, and today we're showcasing our young people talking about the essential role of youth empowerment. Everyone you will see on this digital dialogue is part of the World Food Prize Foundation family. They have taken part in our youth programs and have worked on issues related to agriculture, food security, and stability. Our moderators for today, Ellen and Alyssa, both participated in our youth programs before joining our team. And two of our speakers, Dennis and Priscilla, were a part of our youth programs before they graciously accepted our invitation to be on our Council of Advisors. I'm excited to hear from these young people about their experiences and also about their perspective for the future. And now, I turn it over to my excellent staff, Ellen and Alyssa.
Thank you, Ambassador Branstad, for those remarks and for emphasizing our organizational mission to help young people use their skills, strengths, and passions to positively shape the future of food and agriculture. I would like to introduce my colleague and co-moderator for today, Ellen Franzenburg, the Foundation's Director of Awards and Lectures. I cannot think of a better co-moderator for today's discussion because Ellen herself was empowered as a young student as she attended the Global Youth Institute. She was also a Borlaug Ruan International Intern at the World Vegetable Center in Taiwan and a USDA Wallace Carver Fellow with the USDA Agricultural Research Service. Ellen, I'm excited to guide this discussion with you.
Likewise, Alyssa. And you too were also empowered by the World Food Prize Foundation's youth programs as an Iowa Youth Institute participant, a Global Youth Institute participant, and a volunteer. And you were also a Borlaug Ruan International Intern in Guatemala in 2017. And so we're so glad that you could join the foundation as a program manager on our International Dialogues team.
Well, I'm very glad to be here. In the first part of our webinar today, we would like each speaker to share what they have learned about global hunger challenges through their unique World Food Prize Foundation experiences, and to tell us why it is so important to empower young people to address food insecurity and sustainable issues.
And to start off our roundtable, I would like to call upon Jaden Ulrichs. Jaden is an agronomist at the Sustainable Environmental Consultants and first came to the World Food Prize Foundation in 2019 when he attended the Iowa Youth Institute and the Global Youth Institute. And then he came back to the foundation as a George Washington Carver communications intern in 2021 and has been volunteering at the Borlaug Dialogue ever since. The George Washington Carver internship provides college students with the opportunity to support the foundation's mission by working hand in hand with our staff. I've worked with many George Washington Carver interns, and Jaden is one that has gone above and beyond the call of duty. So Jaden, tell us a bit about your World Food Prize Foundation journey and what you learned about empowerment during those experiences.
Well, good morning, Ellen, and everyone on today, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. But really reflecting on my time as, a GWC intern, as my time in both the Iowa and the Global Youth Institutes, and then being a volunteer and even sitting here today, I really think it's important to empower youth to really think about fighting world hunger and food insecurity, because you need to plant the seed young. For me, as a senior in high school, that was when I first got involved with World Food Prize Foundation programs. And my goal back then was simply to work in the ag industry beyond corn and soybeans. Being from small town Iowa, I had my fair share of working in the field, and I wanted to do something just beyond that and broaden my horizons. And so that was when my personal, seed was planted, and my goal and mission to fight world hunger. And so I really think about kind of the step-by-steps, those smaller steps that I took to kind of achieve that goal over the years, because I feel like so many young people, and myself included even to this day, we have this notion in our head that we have to come up with some monumental solution that will affect a community a world away, tomorrow. The World Food Prize laureate this year, she didn't wake up and come up with this great idea. That was over an entire career that she's been able to make change. And so taking those small steps, because every opportunity builds upon the last. And so really thinking about, planting that seed is what I'm thinking about here. At a younger age, if I were to be involved with World Food Prize programs when I was a freshman in high school instead of a senior, I would love to know where I'd be today, because I would have been able to take so many other small steps throughout those 3 years that I just didn't, because I didn't know about the programs at the time. But I really think just developing that mission over the time that you're considered a youth while you're young, and then someday that seed will grow into a future World Food Prize laureate. But thank you.
And thanks, Jaden. You are a very accomplished, even while starting as a senior, so thank you for joining us, and thank you for encouraging us to plant that seed. I would like to introduce another one of our George Washington Carver interns, Neha Kashyap. She is a recent Master of International Affairs graduate from Texas A&M University. She was a George Washington Carver intern in 2022 and is currently a Wallace Carver Fellow at the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the Office of the Secretary. For context, the Wallace Carver Fellowship offers exceptional college students the opportunity to collaborate with world-renowned scientists and policymakers through paid fellowships at leading USDA research centers and offices across the United States. The fellows participate in a high-level, week-long Wallace Carver Leadership Symposium at the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C., hosted by the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and it actually just wrapped up a few days ago. So, Neha, reflecting on your previous and current internship roles with the World Food Prize Foundation, why is it important to empower young people to address food security and sustainability issues?
Hey, Alyssa, thank you so much for that introduction. It's an honor and privilege to be here with you all today. I think it's really crucial to empower the next generation because young people are inheriting the next landscape of food security. And more than that, some of them are bound to want to change that landscape. Growing up, I ended up splitting my childhood between growing up in South Texas and also growing up in South India, where I was exposed to rampant poverty and food insecurity, which was absolutely astonishing to me. I knew I wanted to do something to change that, but I didn't necessarily know how to or maybe the best path to. The foundation gave me an opportunity to explore the world of food security and how people could contribute in different ways and from different but related fields like trade or public policy or public health. I think it's crucial to have organizations that capitalize on the passion and motivation young people have to change the world. I think that there's no waiting. It would be a waste to wait whenever it comes to advancing food and nutritional security. We are the change we seek, and youth empowerment is certainly a part of creating a more proactive future. So I think having opportunities available to young people and exposing them to the landscape of the food security world will make them have a better idea of how they want to contribute. For example, one of my primary responsibilities as a Carver intern last summer was helping prep for the 2022 Borlaug Dialogue. And one of the things I did was get to research the background of different panelists and see the career journey they took. And this was an amazing experience because it gave me people to really look up to. Even now, as a professional at the USDA, I'm given the opportunity to work with amazing people. And I have new role models I look up to who shape what type of professional that I want to be and also don't want to be. So I think it's important to empower youth because they will soon be in charge of environmental stewardship because they're incredibly capable and passionate about executing change and because they're learning more about who they want to be and still shaping their identity.
Thank you, Neha. That was so insightful, and thanks for sharing your passion with us. And I think you're shaping up to be a great role model yourself here. So now I think it will be fitting to turn to Nick Blumenthal now, another alumnus who is finishing up a busy summer in Washington, D.C. So Nick is a rising senior at the University of Florida studying nutritional sciences and artificial intelligence. And he recently discovered an interest in food and agriculture while serving as a counselor for the World Food Prize Foundation Florida Youth Institute, which has led him to engagements with the United Nations, the White House, and the state of Florida. And he is currently conducting structural food systems economics research at the International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington, D.C. as a Borlaug Ruan intern. The Borlaug Ruan International Internship has placed over 400 students since its start in 1998, and it provides high school and college students a unique professional experience working with world-renowned scientists and policymakers at leading research and development organizations around the world. So Nick, what have you learned about empowerment from your experiences?
Thank you, Ellen, for the introduction, and thank you all for being with us today. It truly is an honor and a privilege to be able to speak and get to address several other youth leaders that are already engaged and are leading efforts in this space. For me, a big consideration was that everyone, including youth, are already active participants within our global food system. Consider your last trip to the grocery store and think about the path and all of the actors that were involved with the growing, processing, and distributing that food to where it is on the shelf in front of you. These questions were what initially prompted me to begin looking into opportunities to find out these answers. And for me, Jaden had previously mentioned about the fact that he had found out as a high schooler about the foundation and ways to get involved. But for me, it was a little bit later, and something where it is never too late to truly get involved within these systems and become a leader in the field. I was led in my freshman year of college and discovered the World Food Prize Foundation as kind of an effort to get to learn a little bit more about these answers to these questions about what is the path of our food system and who are those relevant actors involved. For me, as a counselor for the Florida Youth Institute, I was able to get engaged within my community. And I learned about how all these stakeholders collaborated to ensure our grocery stores were stocked. But I also realized that there were lackings in the system. Lackings that contributed to the accessibility and affordability issues that contributed to persisting food insecurity within my state of Florida. Food is an essential humanitarian right, and individuals enduring food insecurity in your community shouldn't have to search for their next meal. Our generation, youth, are motivated and capable of finding the right contacts and resources to address these systemic causes of local food insecurity that affect our friends and neighbors. For me, a big experience was taking this experience within the International Food Policy Research Institute, where a lot of research was done in terms of the economics of food systems and how all of these integral factors affect the food system. In terms of advising governments on economic issues within the space, I worked on projects where we advised foreign governments across Africa about what were the threats in their food systems that led to this affordability and accessibility issues. It's more than just the producers and farmers, and it's more than just the distributors of these foods in the grocery stores themselves. Youth are just as privy to all of these other issues that contribute to the space. Issues such as gender inequality, issues such as poverty, such as rural access to resources in rural communities. All of these different resources all come in together and play into this issue. And as youth, we are individuals that have experienced the vast majority of these issues as citizens within our home nations and are in a place where we do have the time and the resources, capacity, and motivation in order to address these issues to create a positive impact. Hunger is an issue that can't wait years for the next policy to be passed. It requires our action now. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. We are inspired by your Borlaug Ruan experience and also hearing more about your story. So thank you again for those inspiring remarks. We have with us another speaker who is still finishing a busy summer as a Borlaug Ruan international intern that I'd like to turn to next. Huda Ibrahim is currently in Lima, Peru at CIP, the International Potato Center. Huda is originally from Syria and currently lives in Sweden, where she participated in the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences Youth Institute and virtually participated in the Global Youth Institute last year. Huda, tell us about your World Food Prize Foundation experience and how that has helped you see the value of youth empowerment.
Ever since I've gotten involved with the World Food Prize Foundation last year, my eyes have opened up for problems beyond my imagination. With every word I read whilst writing the Global Challenge paper, I only got more educated on the matter of food security and humanitarian issues. And the more I also realized the urgency in this problem. With every word I read, I improved myself as a person and grew an enormous interest in what is one of today's major limitations. With submitting my paper, I was privileged to participate in the 2022 Global Youth Institute, and to say that that was an exhilarating experience is an understatement. Even though I participated virtually, I sensed the need for action as I listened to several experts and students who had the same interests and aspirations as me. Never have I ever learned so much about poverty and the necessity for a global initiative. And beyond the learning opportunities, the World Food Prize also helped me to live life with a different worldview. And that's why I consciously chose to apply for the 2023 Borlaug Ruan internship, where I'm currently completing my last week here at CIP, which also helped me realize the significance of youth empowerment. Because us young people are the driving force of our communities. We're the ones who are going to build up our future. But there is no future if there is no food security, which is why it is utterly important for young people to realize the potential that lies in the agricultural sector and aim to pursue a career related to it. Because agriculture is so much more than just farming, and everyone is affected by it. If we want to achieve global food security, us young people need to take matters into our own hands and fight for it, and fight for sustainability as well. And a big part of that is making sure to include everyone and put emphasis on rural youth who are especially vulnerable due to the lack of services provided to them. We, the new generation, need to take into account everything that our predecessors missed and ensure that food security and sustainability is available in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Huda. That was great. Thank you for sharing your inspiring story and your unique experience with us. And you're really taking action, as you said, with your internship at the International Potato Center. So good luck with the rest of your internship. I would really like to call upon Dennis next. He's also calling from halfway around the world. So Dennis Vlegels is currently doing a double master's in plant sciences and bioinformatics at Wageningen University and research in the Netherlands. And he first participated in the Global Youth Institute in 2018 and is currently a youth representative on the World Food Prize Foundation's Council of Advisors. So Dennis, what do you think?
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're from. Thanks for the introduction, Alan. It's truly an honor to be here. So, like you said, I was 18 when I first encountered the World Food Prize Foundation. During high school, I thought I was interested in biology, but agriculture, I never considered agriculture to be a possible career path for me. Participating in an event of my local youth institute, Wageningen Youth Institute, was the first step on a path that led me to study plant sciences. Participating in the Global Youth Institute was an eye-opener for sure. I stayed involved with the Wageningen Youth Institute through various tasks, mostly guiding young students in writing their global challenge. Additionally, I also had the honor to be a GYI group leader, and now almost 2 years ago, Priscilla and I became part of the Council of Advisors as youth representatives. But this journey is not just about me, it's about a much larger picture. The youth of today will inherit a world filled with challenges in food security and sustainability. My experience with the World Food Prize Foundation has shown me that empowering the youth in this area is not just vital, it's imperative, as the youth also inherit all the anxiety that comes with these challenges. In the Netherlands, where I grew up, my school system didn't necessarily guide us towards these issues. It took extracurricular organizations like the World Food Prize Foundation to give me that push towards discovering what I'm passionate about. Working with my local youth institute has shown me the power of encouragement and guidance, but it's not always easy to get students to participate, and many of them therefore miss these essential experiences. They're either busy with schoolwork or other commitments. But we should not be the first ones to give up on providing those opportunities for them. Miriam, my coordinator of the Wageningen Youth Institute, she's a great example for this. She does not get demotivated from students that cannot participate due to these other school commitments, for example. And she tries to accommodate and try again. When we empower young people, we're investing in the future. We're fostering a generation that will not just understand the challenges of food security and sustainability, but will actively work to address them. The passion I see in the youth I work with inspires me every day. What we do for youth today through education, encouragement, and engagement will yield us the solutions of tomorrow. It all starts with recognizing the potential in every young mind and giving them the tools to explore, innovate, and lead.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and thank you for sharing your passion and for mentioning the passion that you see in those who you get to serve. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to call upon your fellow youth representative on our Council of Advisors, Priscilla Trinh. Priscilla is Director of Communications at the Post Growth Institute and seasonally a CSA or Community Supported Agriculture Distribution Manager. She was a 2019 Borlaug Ruan International Intern at the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, and she currently serves as co-coordinator of the Minnesota Youth Institute. Priscilla, take it away.
Thank you, Alyssa. Hello, everyone on the panel and in the audience. It's so good to be back and sharing space with you all again. So like Alyssa said, I was a BR intern in the Philippines, and with my other involvements at the foundation, it really affirmed for me that agriculture was more than just what happens in the field. Like Hugh has said, it is way more than what goes on in the soil. It is the post-harvest storage. It is the shipping of food, the consumption side, and then the waste side of it. The world of food is very broad and it's relevant to everyone. I think young folks, when they go to school, they think of their career, and regardless of your career, food is a basic unit of life that impacts everyone, and everyone can have a say, especially when they recognize their collective power. I think when we talk about success stories and inspiration, there's this hero, this one person who really had a grand solution, and that myopic view of what is success can be very high pressure. Like Jada and Nick said, change takes time and it's a collective effort.
And on top of that, you have young folks that are encouraged to go work and make money, but for what? At the end of the day, we're just trying to put food on the table, right? And find security and quality of life. But there is no safety, there is no quality when there's food insecurity prevalent at home or abroad. And so for me, youth empowerment is important because it enables folks to engage with seemingly disparate and distant systems like food systems. Because during these divisive times, it's important to ground ourselves and humanize each other in something as simple but profound as nutrition and food. That is something that's universally relevant to all of us. And that's why I think when we engage young folks, it's really a chance to fight apathy. I mean, Hawaii's on fire. The news is constantly in our face. We're doom scrolling. And I think empowerment is really helpful because it's hope. And we know we have a voice. And sometimes it's hard to know where to start. But when you start with something as simple as what you put in your mouth every day, I think that's just really cool that we can connect to each other regardless of language or culture. And so I think food security is a great place to start for youth empowerment.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, for sharing with us the broad appeal and the broad relevance of food to today's youth and the way we can all connect with each other on this basic level. And all of our panelists have done such a great job of setting up this topic of empowerment for us. So now I want to turn to a second question, a call to action sort of question. How do we empower youth leaders of today and the next generation of sustainable food security champions? And Nick, I know you said something about this. Would you like to start us off?
Absolutely, Ellen. Thanks for the floor. I want to first call back to maybe something that Priscilla had mentioned about how important it is and how wide-ranging of a basic issue that food insecurity and malnutrition really is. And in terms of now transitioning into exactly how do we create that as sort of empowerment and create the future leaders of tomorrow in this issue, I really want to touch upon something that Dennis had previously mentioned. He mentioned about how important it was that organizations were the ones that initially gave him that opportunity in order to learn that initial bit about the space and find that interest in agriculture. All around the world, it's no secret that agriculture has become a field that has predominantly transitioned into older generations, and the youth have to have an increased support system to first create that initial interest and also provide that support structure for finding continuing opportunities in the field. And so building off of that, I really think there's kind of a shared responsibilities between these organizations and youth. Organizations like the World Food Prize Foundation must first provide these kinds of opportunities that gain exposure and knowledge of how our global food systems work. And I think even just through my fellow panelists, we each have such a diverse range of experiences of how we've been able to engage within this sector. We have George Washington Carver fellow interns that are the ones that are able to directly work with the World Food Prize Foundation and gain that direct experience in the field. We have Borlaug Ruan interns such as myself and Neha that were able to gain that experience within these international organizations that are at the forefront of these issues. And of course, we have Dennis and Priscilla that are able to now continue on and create those policy impacts. And so I think organizations are the ones that provide the opportunities, but I think it's also up to youth to be proactive in searching for these opportunities and advocating for youth representation in these places where we haven't traditionally been represented. I think within each of the youth and applying to these types of programs and initiatives and reaching out to our local members and parties, that it's such an important effort that we each take our own initiative and educating ourselves and finding where our interests are and how can we contribute to these issues that affect all of us. And in representation, as youth leaders, we must be able to represent the opinions and the other fellow stakeholders of youth that haven't been represented. Our generation, Gen Z, has had such an incredible responsibility to the world and has made incredible contributions in the past several years alone across a range of humanitarian issues. And it's time for us to step up and take advantage of the opportunities provided to us to fellow individuals as well.
Yeah, and I want to add something to that, and that empowerment is it's a process. It's something that takes time. It's about providing opportunities, encouragement, and support. And in my journey, I found empowerment through collaboration and mentorship. So my friends and I started a small business a few years ago selling these healthy meals produced from local produce, and we sold them frozen. And it was an idea born of a desire to make healthy eating affordable and accessible for students like us. And we had this mentor, Jessica Duncan, and she didn't just believe in our idea, she gave us the confidence to make it happen. And that mentorship was a powerful force in our journey. But we were fortunate, and not every student has access to such support. And that's why it's essential to create opportunities within our education system that go beyond academics. Empowering the youth through CAR is a system that encourages creativity, fosters collaboration, and provides mentorship. We need to create environments where ideas are not just born, but nurtured and developed. And it's about connecting students with resources and guiding them through the process of turning an idea into a reality. So my advice, let's focus on fostering an environment where youth are not just taught, but inspired. And don't get me wrong, I would be the last person to say coursework is not important. But I reckon a few hours a month dedicated towards inspiration could be an investment worth it 1,000 times more than, let's say, a few hours of organic chemistry or Latin or German. So let's connect students with mentors, encourage them to collaborate, and provide them with the tools to turn their ideas into a reality. Let's create a world where every young mind knows that they can make a difference because they can and they will. Their passion, creativity, and determination are our greatest assets in the fight against global hunger. As mentors, we need to understand the difference between giving them the correct tools, but also taking them seriously and providing confidence. And sometimes students simply need to be seen.
Yeah, to bounce off that, I really love the ideas that you just talked about, Dennis, really bringing in the role of a mentor or people that young people respect or adults, is the impact and power that they can have on youth. I know, thinking back to how I became a George Washington Carver intern, it was my freshman year at college, and I had learned about the opportunity, and it was a brief 30-second interaction, but I went to one of my professors and described the internship to them, and I said, "Do you think I'd be any good at this?" And she simply said, "Jaden, I think you would be great as an intern at the World Food Prize." And then she had to run off to another class or teach another class. But then I wasn't a George Washington Carver intern until my junior year. And so there was a 2-year gap. But that brief 30-second interaction of her believing in me and telling me that I would be great empowered me enough to stick through those 2 years until the timing was right when I applied and, became an intern, a George Washington Carver intern. And so I think that role of a mentor or people of respect, you can easily empower a young person by simply giving them inspiration or, through that 30-second interaction. Empowerment doesn't have to be the next day. I mean, it stuck with me for 2 years before everything fell in line to become that intern. And so I loved that aspect of mentorship and how that can empower youth so easily.
Jaden, I really appreciate the insight that you gave there, and it's really an incredible story about hearing about how a seemingly small interaction really led to all of these ripples down the line that have enabled you to create all of these incredible contributions that you have since. Your story really reminded me of a personal mentor that who was more so less of a personal motivator, but more of kind of an inspiring figure that I look up to. Within Florida, I attend the University of Florida, where it's kind of a general college town, and it's a college town that's fairly affluent, but kind of the surrounding areas have been are more neglected food deserts that haven't necessarily had as much historical investment into enabling incredible livelihoods. And an effort that I was able to recently get involved with on campus, maybe it was a year or two ago now, was the Gainesville Community Giving Garden. And it was an initiative that started out with a community member who is fairly young and who all started out with an idea. There was an abandoned parking lot in the middle of town, and she thought, why not transition an abandoned parking lot into something that could benefit the community? And so she developed this parking lot over the course of about a year and a half. She found the funding, the supporters, and the community partners that enabled this transition of a parking lot to a community garden that enables healthy produce and vegetables for so many individuals that do live in these food deserts. And it was a really inspiring thing to me. It wasn't necessarily kind of a personal motivation. Although she certainly has supported me in so many ways since, I'm immeasurably grateful to her. But it's also been an incredible, inspiring story about how youth, even out of college, have created so many incredible initiatives within their local communities. I think a lot of times it's very easy to get caught up in kind of international, national, statewide initiatives, but it's also just as important when empowering youth to realize that they can make incredible contributions within their own communities themselves. At the Giving Garden, it's expanded now from becoming a partnership of the founder and 4 of her friends to now being having weekly over 50 volunteers coming to help harvest vegetables, distribute them to members, and has grown into such a larger effort. And I think it's such a key contribution from youth altogether about how we can really create these initiatives ourselves and contribute to a bigger world on this process that's bigger to ourselves as well.
I'll jump in here because what you said is similar to my feelings about it, Nick, how youth really don't have to wait to start engaging. I mean, the real world is here. It's not waiting out there for us to be admitted to after school. I myself have to remind pretty routinely that you can be an adult now and that you can start developing insights now. And one of the key tools for empowering youth today, I think, is systems thinking. I find it crucial to really balance and weigh the moving parts when you're thinking of solutions or ideas or concepts. For me personally, when I have an idea, I ask myself, if your solutions are not questioning the current economic paradigm or considering the supply chains and the source of materials, you got to ask, who's benefiting from the solution? What global north or global south dynamics are at play? Where and how is the solution sourced? You know, like when we talk about renewable energy or precision agriculture, where are we getting the minerals to build those technologies? Who is building them? Who's able to afford them? Who's able to access them? I think when youth really consider these large questions before they dive headfirst and get really emotionally invested, it's important because then you'll save yourself disappointment later on from green growth narratives or like techno-utopia narratives. And systems thinking for me, that was what I went to school for. That's my background, systems thinking, sustainable systems management. And it's been helpful for me to gain clarity, especially when we live in a digital age where there's so much information out there. It's like, how do you sift through it? How do you connect with folks who've already started? How do you pick up where someone started a project and how do you continue that legacy? I find it really helpful to have that tool. And I think young folks are already kind of already tapped into that. You know, we have multiple apps, multiple conversations going on at the same time, right? We're already systems thinkers in a way. And so knowing that the solutions are here, you have to deepen into your wisdom instead of constantly looking out there for progress. I think it's really cool to remind ourselves that we are complex human beings with systems inside of us. And if we can tap into that, then we'll be able to steer the systems outside of us for collective well-being, such as a community garden, which sounds simple, but it's not. And I know that from experience. So great story there. Over to you, Neha.
Hey, Priscilla, thank you so much for bringing up systems thinking. So I have a background in economics, and I think it's crucial to think about whenever we are implementing different solutions to think along the supply chain, the production, the distribution, the procurement, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about, I think we've all touched on access to opportunities and how are we really impacting people on the ground. I also wanted to bring up, the importance of increasing opportunities in rural communities in America. So that's one of USDA's strategic goals. And I think part of this goal is giving increased freedom of choice to people in rural communities to cultivate the land or to pursue other career opportunities. And this affects the next generation because it changes the financial calculus for families, especially with advances in technology. But what this does for young people is give them a choice of whether they want to inherit the family farm, which is now more economically feasible. So overall, I think that there is a chance to be inclusive with different work streams, but it's also crucial to get a good understanding of how various initiatives impact young people and the opportunities available to them. Now, Personally, I think since we have all talked about access to opportunities, it's important to understand what that tangibly looks like on the company level as well. It's really easy for organizations to give the intern administrative tasks that are time consuming or annoying to do, but I think that's detrimental to empowerment. I think having an opportunity to contribute in a substantive way and take those baby steps, like Jaden was saying, to work on a project, on a team, to develop the technical and the soft skills necessary, not only important for a job, but for society overall. And so I think one part of this is also companies being mindful about the culture surrounding interns and just how inclusive they are being and how this affects collaboration and the end results for our projects. So.
Neha, I just want to kind of expand upon a point there. I thought you brought in a really interesting insight about how getting involved in this field is so much more beyond even just the farms themselves, and goes on to kind of the government angles, figuring out what policies are impactful in this space, and how companies can really engage interns in creating significant contributions to the field. I know with many of us, some of us have been in research centers, some of us are in government settings, and I think that's a really important topic, especially when we consider kind of the empowerment of youth leaders, is that youth leaders can get involved on so many different levels and in so many different facets of agriculture altogether. I think a lot of the times agriculture is associated with farming overall, and maybe there are individuals that can get involved in that, and that's something that they are passionate about. But I think it's just as important that these opportunities are provided to youth leaders even outside of the farm. I know, Neha, you brought up being at the USDA and having insight and a say into kind of how rural communities are given. I think that kind of urban planning and those kinds of initiatives are just as integral to agriculture, and I'm so glad that you were able to get that insight and experience into that facet of the industry. I think it's just as important in terms of a government role to be able to have that significant on-the-ground experience, whether in my case it was helping to do research advising governments, and some of the others may as well might be able to provide insight into how they've been able to engage with various kind of philosophies and companies to try to change industry standards. And I think that's a really important aspect as well. And so I'm just really glad that you brought that up, Neha. Thank you.
Yeah, I also want to add something more. I think we're all sharing these wonderful insights on how to empower the youth. And at least in my environment, my fellow students, they have been in touch with all these ideas, all these ways to collaborate, and all these ways to get inspired. But I think it's also easy for youth to get overwhelmed and get sort of this shock reaction when you're just dealing with such a large problem. So I think it's also important for organizations, for academics to also spend time on how to deal with, for example, climate anxiety, because we can only deliver a meaningful change when we're not frozen by fear.
Absolutely,
Thank you so much
Dennis.
for the
Over to you,
insight.
Nina.
I would also like to add that there is a need to implement integrated approaches which aim at improving communication between youth and adults, and also within youth themselves. And as Dennis and Jaden mentioned before, mentorship is also critical for the empowerment of young people, as is a reform to the education system and decision-making in order to grow a passion for food security and sustainability issues from a young age in our future world leaders, right? And what I also personally feel really puts the situation into frame is creating environments where youth can share their own experiences with food security and relate it to personal experiences, which also helps you realize the importance of caring for it and taking action. We need encouragement, collaborations, and innovations to make sure that young people know that they can and will make a change.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about mentorship as well, I would just add that when I was a freshman in high school, my high school teacher approached me and asked me if I wanted to solve global hunger, which was very daunting. Kind of touching upon Dennis, yes, there was a shock to that question that I received as a freshman in high school. But it was that mentor, that teacher in my life that saw potential in me, not to solve the problem right away, but to play a part in the solutions towards global food security. And I have had countless mentors since then who have helped me discover my passions, strengths, and skills. And really, it's with all of those mentors, I think about the many internships or experiences that I've had that I'm so grateful for. And I really had those experiences because a mentor invested in me. So really connecting between what Jaden and Dennis and Nick and what you were just sharing, I'm so grateful and thankful for those mentors, including Ellen, as you were on the World Food Prize staff before I was. So, Priscilla, I believe you were about to chime in. Would you want to share more?
Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. And I was just going to dovetail off of Dennis about how it's important to hold emotional containers when dealing with these complex issues. And one of the more inspiring tools I've learned recently is asset-based community development. I think historically we're taught to innovate and come in to a community and be like, what do you need? This is our solution, have an external approach to it. And when asset-based thinking is brought into the arena, it's more about looking at youth, people, individuals, communities, organizations, looking at what already works and what is already there to work off of. And I think that alleviates some of the stress Dennis was talking about. Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so asset-based development, I think, is really in alignment with sustainable development as we're all aspiring to those goals. So just throwing that term out there in case that's helpful.
And I think something important that you kind of touched on, Priscilla, and we've been talking about a lot, is kind of external empowerment, as I'll call it, of a mentor having an effect on a young person or an opportunity being presented. But I think another whole half of what empowerment is what comes from within. I know personally, I think one of the biggest and the most effective way to empower a young person is for that person, that individual themselves, to find a passion about something. I know Neha talked earlier, when we were talking about systems thinking. She's a systems thinker, but she's an economist. And I also come from a systems thinking background, but my kind of expertise is horticulture and food production in the literal sense. And so it's so important for my passion to carry through, because as we mature, I have this goal of fighting world hunger, and I'm bringing along this horticulture idea. But as I mature and learn new things and have new opportunities, how I attack that mission is going to change. The mission will stay the same, but how you do it is going to change over time. And so I just really want to advocate for finding what you're passionate about, geeking out about it and becoming that expert in the room, but then at the same time having that systems thinking, because now you're the expert in something, but you're also aware of everything else. While I might not understand a lot about economics, I'm aware of it and I know of the stakeholders, that if I grow a tomato, I'm aware of them. And so I just really want to push for, having that passion and being that driving force, because if there's an obstacle in the way and you're passionate about it, you will find a way, up, over, around that obstacle. Yeah, I just really wanted to mention that.
Jaden, that was a great thing to mention, and talking about the mentorship, and it totally ties back into your point about taking those small steps, and the point we've been making about, everyone's been making about mentorship and finding those mentors and being those mentors. When I was in high school, just a few years ago now, I was, inspired to apply for the Global Youth Institute, and that's the thing that got me into all of these spaces where, in agriculture, in traveling abroad, And in a lot of cases, I was the youngest person in the room. When I was in Taiwan, in the Borlaug Ruan internship, I was the youngest person in the lab by quite a few years, and that was just a unique experience. I learned a lot from that experience, but the fact that even though my lab mates weren't really expecting a 17-year-old to be in a virology lab and, standing alongside them and doing DNA and RNA, electrophoresis, gel tests, all that stuff, they stepped up, and they were all very excellent mentors to me. So that's something that I've tried to bring forward in the rest of my career. And it's also a different experience being the youngest person when you are traveling. You get to see things from a different perspective than I do nowadays. When I was traveling in Uganda, it was a different experience where I was able to really connect with other people my age, to understand what their issues were and what kind of challenges they faced on the ground, which were very different from the challenges that I had. And I have lasting friends that I made from my journey there, and continue to talk to them and communicate with them, and even reach out across those many thousands of miles to support them when they ask for my support from my side of the pond, so to speak. So it's that connection, I think, that youth bring to the table, that ability to make those connections and bring those sides together and really learn from each other. And that was something that, I was really glad that I experienced at a very young age. And I was wondering if maybe some of you can talk a little bit more about that on-the-ground experience. Maybe Huda, you're in Peru right now. I don't know if you've had some experiences there that you could say more about.
Yes, sure. I got the privilege to go on a 10-day tour in the Peruvian highlands, and it's just as you say, you see these different perspectives and how different people live, and being young, you can really be observant and notice all the differences between how people choose to live here, what they choose to eat, how they cultivate their potatoes and native potatoes and everything. So it's really been a truly amazing experience to make these connections here in Peru.
Mm, absolutely. And before we go to our last lightning round question, as in our discussion, we've talked about some Borlaug Ruan international internships in Asia. We've talked, you're tuning in from Peru, Dennis, we have from the Netherlands, and we've talked about our North America, or we have some representatives from North America. I'm curious if anyone else on any of our speakers would like to speak to their experiences in Africa.
I know for me, a lot of the work I have done within my internship has been focused on African governments as a whole, but I guess I can speak to maybe a few other experiences that I've had within the continent. One of the main things that I've gained since having initially been a part of the Florida Youth Institute was realizing just how interconnected the entire world's global food system is. And that's one of the main primary drivers that got me really interested in kind of connecting the policy side and these grassroots organizations like the Giving Garden, and what are those types of organizations that really bridge that gap. And so one of the main things that I've gotten involved with is becoming an agricultural consultant for a Nigerian-based firm, where we work with partners like the UN and several international public and private institutions in order to implement kind of these community initiatives. And so although being a Nigerian-based firm, I've had the chance to be involved on projects that are bringing in companies from Europe, North America, Asia, and really get to implement these projects across Africa and some neighboring states as well. And so through this experience, I've gotten to work with colleagues in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in Benin, and being able to understand so much more about what individuals on the ground are and what leadership looks like there. As much as from a North American perspective, I may not necessarily have quite as much exposure to how these food systems are developed halfway across the world. But really understanding these leaders and getting to know youth leaders in that region of the world that have so much more of a louder voice and are advocating for change in the region, it really brings back, Ellen, to a touch that you talked about how bridging that gap not only between youth and older generations involved in the space, but also just between youth and opposite sides of the world. It's been a huge opportunity of being able to meet fellow youth leaders and learning from each other, collaborating. And it really does help bridge that gap and provide so much more of a global insight and perspective about how different regions of the world view our global food system and how we can help each other.
Thank you so very much, Nick. As we wrap up our webinar today in these last few minutes, I would like to ask each of our speakers in 20 seconds or less to share what advice would you give to young leaders to empower them to alleviate global hunger. Jaden, can we start with you?
Yes, I think my biggest piece of advice is, like I said earlier, be passionate. Be that expert in the room about whatever you choose, because showing that you care demonstrates that you yourself are empowered and you're going to be your best.
Amazing. Neha?
Yeah, I would encourage young people to think about, like Nick said, how that they can bridge the gap, whether they're in academia, in the private sector, in R&D, in government, right? And how do they grow their knowledge about the landscape of food security? And, what does that mean? What does that mean to know the major players, the organizations, the mission of each one, but also how to talk in a way that creates a shared vision and understanding?
Wonderful. Nick?
I would just say we've touched on today about how monumentally daunting it can be to tackle such a big issue like food insecurity. And I would just say whenever things might seem a little bit too daunting, just always remember who you're fighting for. Personally, I fight for the beneficiaries of that community giving garden where I first started, who worry about feeding their children healthy, nutritious food and spend time worrying about the source of their next meal, which takes away from time that they could be spending playing with their children or engaging in other aspects of life. This fight, the fight for food, the fight against hunger, our fight means something. And the world may need us 10 years from now, but I also know for sure that it does need us right now. And so now is the time to act.
Absolutely. Huda?
My advice would be for youth to realize the power that they have to create a society built on their passions and aspirations, and also to always remember that they're fighting amongst millions of other as inspiring young people.
Indeed. Thank you. Dennis?
My advice is to embrace your creativity, seek mentorship, and collaborate with others to turn your ideas into realities. And these are the seeds that can grow into powerful solutions for global hunger. And like Nick also said, you do not have to wait for tomorrow.
Thank you, Dennis. And last but certainly not least, Priscilla.
My advice is, instead of adopting a scarcity mindset of there's not enough money, there's not enough food, there's not enough resources, ask first, not enough for what? Yeah, there's not enough on this planet for 8 billion to be living inequitable, wasteful lives, but there's plenty for everyone to have a decent, lower energetic lifestyle that is nourished and fed. Thank you.
And thank you, Priscilla. And thank you to all of our speakers. I realized during this webinar that by the time, by 2050, our population will reach 9 billion people, and all of the speakers on this call will be at the peak of their careers. And I'm really inspired and really encouraged that each of you are leaders in your unique fields, and we're really inspired by all that you are doing now and what you're doing in the future. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our audience for joining us for today's digital dialogue. The theme of empowerment is one of our 6 sub-themes of the 2023 Normandy Borlaug International Dialogue. Virtual registration is free for all attendees, and there is a discounted student and fellow price for attending in person. The World Food Prize Foundation is honored to follow in the footsteps of our founder, Dr. Borlaug, by providing these professional development opportunities that recognize and empower students in the spheres of global food security and agriculture.
Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you in October for the Borlaug Dialogue.